We all make choices, but in the end, our choices make us. Are you a man or a slave?
We live in a strange time. Extraordinary events keep happening that undermine the stability of our world. Suicide bombings, waves of refugees, Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, the mainstream media, social justice, critical race theory, COVID-19, even Brexit. Yet those in control seem unable to deal with it. No one has any vision of a different or a better kind of future. This is a story about how over the past 40 years, politicians, finances and technological utopians, rather than face up to the real complexities of the world, retreated. Instead, they constructed a simpler version of the world in order to hang on to power. And as this fake world grew, all of us went along with it, because the simplicity was reassuring. Even those who thought they were attacking the system, the radicals, the artists, the musicians, and our whole counterculture, actually became part of the trickery, because they too had retreated into the make-believe world, which is why their opposition has no effect and nothing ever changes. But this retreat into a dream world allowed dark and destructive forces to fester and grow outside. Forces that are now returning to pierce the fragile surface of our carefully constructed fake world. By the middle of the 1980s, the banks were rising up and becoming ever more powerful in America. 10 years before in New York, the idea that the financial system could run society began to spread. But unlike older systems, it was mostly invisible. A writer called William Gibson tried to dramatize what was happening in a powerful, imaginative way in a series of novels. Gibson had noticed how the banks and the new corporations were beginning to link themselves together through computer systems. What they were creating was a series of giant networks of information, which were invisible to ordinary people and to the politicians. But those networks gave the corporations extraordinary new powers of control. Gibson gave this new world a name. He called it cyberspace, and his novels described a future that was dangerous and frightening. Hackers could literally enter into cyberspace, and as they did, they traveled through systems that were so powerful that they could reach out and crush intruders by destroying their minds. In cyberspace, there were no laws and no politicians to protect you, just raw, brutal corporate power. But then, a strange thing happened. A new group of visionaries in America took Gibson's idea of a hidden, secret world and transformed it into something completely different. They turned it into a dream of a new utopia. They were the technological utopians who were rising up on the west coast of America. They turned Gibson's idea on its head. Instead of cyberspace being a frightening place, dominated by powerful corporations, they reinvented it as the very opposite. A new, safe world, where radical dreams could come true. 10 years before, faced by the complexity of real politics, the radicals had given up on the idea of changing the world. But now, the computer utopians saw in cyberspace an alternative reality, a place where they could retreat, away from the harsh politics that now dominated Reagan's America. The roots of this vision laid back in the counterculture of the 1960s, and above all, with LSD. Many of those who had taken LSD in the 60s were convinced it was more than just another drug, that it opened human perception and allowed people to see new realities normally hidden from view. It freed them from the narrow, limited view of the world that was imposed onto them by politicians and those in power.
In the United States, in the next 5, 10, 50 years, you're going to see more and more people taking LSD and making it a part of their lives. So there will be an LSD country within 50 years, an LSD society. There'll be less interest in, obviously, warfare, in power politics. You know, politics today is a disease. That's a real addiction. Politics, 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 politics. Don't politic. Don't vote. These are old men's games. Impotent and senile old men that want to put you onto their old chess games of war and power.
20 years later, the new networks of machines seem to offer a way to construct a real, alternate reality. Not just one that was chemically induced, but a space that actually existed in a parallel dimension to the real world. And like with acid, cyberspace could be a place where you would be liberated from the old corrupt hierarchies of politics and power and explore new ways of being. One of the leading exponents of this idea was called John Perry Barlow. In the 60s, he had written songs for the Grateful Dead and had been a part of the acid counterculture. He then began to organize what he called Cyberthorn. It was an attempt to try and bring to life the cyberspace movement.
Governments of the industrial world, you weary giants of flesh and steel, I come from cyberspace, the new home of mind. On behalf of the future, I ask you of the past to leave us alone. You are not welcome among us. You have no sovereignty where we gather. I declare the global social space we are building to be naturally independent of the tyrannies you seek to impose on us. Cyberspace does not lie within your borders. Do not think that you can build it as though it were a public works project. You cannot. It is an act of nature, and it grows itself through our collective actions. Cyberspace consists of transactions, relationships, and thought itself. Ours is a world that is both everywhere and nowhere, but it is not where bodies live. We are creating a world that all may enter without privilege or prejudice accorded by race, economic power, military force, or station of birth. We are creating a world where anyone, anywhere, may express his or her beliefs, no matter how singular, without fear of being coerced into silence or conformity. Your legal concepts of property, expression, identity, movement, and context do not apply to us. You are terrified of your own children. Because you fear them, you entrust your bureaucracies with the parental responsibilities you are too cowardly to confront yourselves. In China, Germany, France, Russia, Singapore, Italy, and the United States, you are trying to ward off the virus of liberty by erecting guard posts at the frontiers of cyberspace. These may keep out the contagion for a small time, but they will not work in a world that will soon be blanketed with bit-bearing media. Your increasingly obsolete information industries would perpetuate themselves by proposing laws in America and elsewhere that claim to own speech itself throughout the world. These laws would declare ideas to be another industrial product no more noble than pig iron. In our world, whatever the human mind may create can be reproduced and distributed infinitely at no cost. The global conveyance of thought no longer requires your factories to accomplish. These increasingly hostile and colonial measures place us in the same position as those previous lovers of freedom and self-determination who had to reject the authorities of distant, uninformed powers. We must declare our virtual selves immune to your sovereignty, even as we continue to consent to your rule over our bodies. We will spread ourselves across the planet so that no one can arrest our thoughts. We will create a civilization of the mind in cyberspace. May it be more humane and fair than the world your governments have made before. Davos, Switzerland, February 8th, 1996. And read in New York City, July 30th, 2013.